A billionaire invited a cleaning lady to play chess just to humiliate her. But her first move shocked the entire elite club. This is a story about hidden genius, quiet sacrifice, and a game that turns into something much bigger than a trophy. Emily Brooks cleans floors at night and teaches kids chess on a drawn plywood board. Nathan Carter is a rich Oxford graduate, a star of the Boston elite, used to winning every match and every negotiation. One unexpected checkmate breaks his illusion of control and starts a long journey. From obsession and wounded ego to respect, partnership, and a new life where the strongest moves are made not on stage, but in community centers and children's classrooms. Watch till the end to see how a nobody from Dorchester becomes the heart of a city chess program, and how a billionaire learns to play the longest game of all, a life shared on equal terms. That evening, the Black Horse was crowded. The dull gold of the chandeliers, laughter in glasses, the aromas of expensive whiskey and fine tobacco. The tables were covered with green tablecloths, the pieces polished to a mirror shine. Everything was familiar, a ritual in which Nathan felt like a god. He had just checkmated on the 22nd move. The corporate lawyer from New York resigned with relief, as if it had been planned. Applause. Cameras, shaking hands. Everything as usual. Nathan Carter, heir to a fortune, Oxford graduate, an eccentric chess player, whom the newspapers described as a combination of intuition and composure. His chess clock cost more than a month's salary for half the room. He nodded to his assistant, took his glass, and headed for the panoramic windows. Outside the glass was nighttime Boston, behind him a world in which he was unreachable. It seemed nothing could upset this balance. Until the door creaked and a woman in a gray work uniform entered the room. She was clearly mistaken. Small, thin, with bags under her eyes. Her hair was pulled back into a careless bun, her face tired but focused. She froze when she saw the audience, but did not leave. She walked over to one of the empty tables and began wiping it down. "Sorry, but the room is already closed for cleaning," someone said mockingly. "I know," she replied. The board simply remained set. There was indeed a board on the table, black and white in the opening position. She glanced at it and suddenly said, "Interesting setup, unusual symmetry in the pawn formation." Nathan turned, his gaze narrowing. "Do you understand chess?" "Enough," she said, shrugging to see that your last opponent had missed the bishop and queen pin 3 times. Someone chuckled. The atmosphere changed, as before a storm. "Want to try?" Nathan asked, bored, irritated, and feeling untouchable. She approached, uncertain, but without fear. She sat down and took off her gloves. The guests began to whisper, "White or black? It doesn't matter." He nodded and began e4. On the 3rd move, he noticed that she wasn't just playing, she was seeing. She wasn't copying famous openings, but sensing the structure, as if reading between the lines. On the 15th move, he's on the defensive. On the 20th, he's starting to get nervous. On the 26th, he makes a move that seems logical, and she checkmates him. Silence. This has never happened in the entire existence of the club. Emily stands up, doesn't look around, just leaves without a word. He remains rooted to the spot, as if he's not just lost, as if something that made him untouchable has been taken out of him. Who is she? He hears behind him. Nobody knows. And that's what scares him most. 3 days passed, 3 sleepless, restless nights in which chessboards replaced one another in Nathan's head like newspaper covers. Move after move, the game with Emily played in his head like a broken record. He tried to find her logical flaws. There were none. He looked for chaos and found none. Everything in her game was frighteningly harmonious. But the strangest thing was that she didn't exist. He checked all the publicly available databases of chess ratings, women's tournaments, junior leagues, and not a single Emily Brooks anywhere, not a single mention or record. He even sent a request through a private agent. He returned with 2 pages. Age approximately 32. Female, no criminal record. Works as a cleaner for a contracting company. Lives in the Dorchester area. That's it. No sports career, no club affiliation, no coaching experience. "It's impossible," Nathan muttered, leafing through the endless reports. "They don't play like that, just like that. This isn't an amateur, this is a master. The bare minimum." He felt neither humiliation nor anger. He felt hunger, intellectual and human. Who was this woman, and why wasn't she on the world chess map? On the evening of the fourth day, he went for a walk without security, without a car, simply walking along the Charles River until he found himself in an area he wouldn't have even thought to look at before, and suddenly he saw her. She was sitting at a wooden table in a small city park. In front of her was a board, faded wood with missing edges. Opposite it stood an older man in a camouflage jacket. His hands were shaking, but his eyes were focused. Emily was explaining something softly, almost in a whisper. He nodded, made a move, made a mistake. She wasn't scolding him, just showing him how things could have been done differently. Nathan came closer. "You're not a ghost," he said by way of greeting. Emily looked up, not surprised, just smiling slightly. "And you're too stubborn. I was looking for you. I know. You are the kind of person who never leaves questions unanswered." He sat down next to her. The wind ruffled her hair. The chess pieces were different. One had even been replaced by a button. Everything was so far from the world of Black Horse that it seemed like another dimension. "Revenge?" he asked. "Here," she chuckled. "Here." They set up the pieces. The man in camouflage watched with curiosity. The game had begun. This time more carefully, deeper, with mutual attentiveness. She played with the same ease, but now he was ready, or thought he was ready. The moves were slow, almost meditative. He caught himself not just playing, he was enjoying himself. Every threat, every defense, like a dialogue. An hour later, a draw. Positionally logical. No one won, but no one lost either. They looked at each other silently. "Why did you leave then without saying a word?" he asked. "Because I had nothing to say. Winning didn't make me better, and losing wouldn't make you worse." He fell silent. The words caught in his throat. He realized. Before him was not just a chess player. Before him was a man for whom the game was not a weapon, but simply a way of being. "I can't forget that game," he admitted. "No grandmaster ever did this to me. Perhaps because I didn't play to win," Emily said calmly. "I just wanted to play." He looked at her. She was putting the pieces back in the box, slowly, carefully, as if they weren't objects, but living beings. "And if I offered you to play again, under normal conditions in the hall, with a publication, with a clock, that would already be a performance," she answered. "And I'm not an actress. I'm a cleaner." She stood up, saying goodbye to the veteran. He hugged her. Nathan watched her disappear into the depths of the park, not waiting for praise, not accepting offers. He realized she knew how to leave and return only of her own free will, but something clicked in him. He couldn't allow such a game to remain in the shadows. He had to learn its history and find a way to play not only on the board, but in life. The next morning he arrived in the area he now knew by heart, Dorchester, modest, dusty, living by its own rules. No personal driver, no suit, no watches worth hundreds of thousands. Just him and the question that burned inside. He found Emily in a small community center, a shabby building with a peeling sign, a community space for children and families. Inside, old chairs, boards, children's drawings on the walls, and she, in a t-shirt, jeans, without a drop of makeup, is explaining something to a 10-year-old boy. In front of them is a board drawn with a marker on plywood. He sat in the corner, not disturbing, watching. Half an hour later, she came over. In her hands is a cup of cheap coffee. "I thought you gave up," she said with a half-smile. "I don't know how to give up," he replied. They went outside and sat down on a bench. It smelled of dust and roasted peanuts from the corner. "Tell me," he asked. "I can't play with shadows." She was silent for a long time, then sighed. "I was 15 when I won my first regional tournament. I had a chance to go to the national tournament. They even gave me sponsorship. I lived in a small town near Springfield at the time. My father left when I was 8. My mother worked 3 jobs, and then she got sick. The diagnosis was one where your chances of survival can be counted on the fingers of one hand." Nathan, without interrupting. "I quit everything. Chess, school. I stayed with her. My sister was 5. I washed floors, worked part-time at a gas station. Mom died 2 years later. I took guardianship of my sister so that she wouldn't be taken into foster care, paperwork, courts, social services. No time for chess. And now?" he asked quietly. "Now she's studying at university. With a grant, I was able to. For her sake." He looked at her like a discovery. It became clear that she seemed a genius. But the fact that she chose not the path of glory, but the path of silence, was more striking than any shah. "And what about chess?" he asked. "Why didn't you come back?" "I play here." She waved her hand towards the center. With children, with those to whom no one will explain anything, if not me. I don't regret it. You could run a school, a program, a section. You have talent. It's not a question of talent, it's a question of choice. He was silent. That same night, he began to act, not for the sake of salvation, but for the sake of balance. He bought a lot of buildings for the foundation. One of the facilities, the center where Emily worked, was renovated using funds from nonprofit support for the development of urban initiatives. Anonymous, he supported it with a grant for training chess coaches, bought sets of equipment from boards to timers. All without his name, without banners. She knew nothing for a while. And then, a month later, new children began to appear at the center. Parents signed up for the waiting list. Journalists wrote about the social initiative, not knowing who launched it. Emily suspected, but remained silent. They continued to play. Every evening one game. Sometimes he lost, sometimes won, sometimes a draw. But that was not the most important thing. More important was how their silence between moves became confidential, how after the match they drank tea from a vending machine and talked about childhood, dreams, fears. One day he suggested, "I want you to become a coach at the chess academy. Salary, housing, insurance, everything is official." She looked at him carefully. "Don't make a charity project out of me, Nathan." He sighed. "This is not charity. This is selfishness. If you have stability, you will continue to beat me, and that is what I want. I need someone who is a challenge." She looked at him for a long time. "Okay," she finally said. "Contact Mr. Carlson from the city hall. He will check you out. If you do everything honestly, I'll think about it tomorrow." She stood up and this time didn't leave, but remained sitting next to me, quietly, calmly, as an equal. 2 weeks later, a new person appeared on the staff list at the Northern Gambit Chess Academy. Emily Brooks, the position of director of the City Children's Program. Conditions: full-time, health insurance, housing 15 minutes from the center. No cameras, interviews, or public attention. She agreed without fanfare, just came on the first day and brought an old board with her, the same plywood one, drawn with a marker. She hung it in the hall for the little ones. No logos, no initials, just a signature. Play not to win, play to grow. The first lesson, 20 children. A month later, 60. By mid-spring, there was a waiting list 6 months in advance. Nathan kept a low profile, but began to appear more and more often. At first, he just played with the children, then he led clubs with Emily. And then she gave him a rag and said, "Today you're cleaning the chess area. Learn from the best." He wasn't offended and didn't even smirk. He did it because he understood she wouldn't let him be above her, only close. Interest in her began to grow. Parents, local journalists, editors of the city success columns. They began inviting her to local broadcasts. She refused, but made an exception when it came to supporting the program. They began calling her a teacher without a medal, but this didn't change anything inside her. She continued to come in the morning, wipe the boards, set up the pieces and wait for the students. One late evening after a difficult lesson, they were sitting on a bench near the academy. A warm breeze rustled the leaves. The light from the window made her face softer than he was used to seeing. "Have you ever wanted to come back for real?" he asked. "What do you mean for real?" "Tournaments, competitions, publications, real fights." She leaned back on the bench and thought. "I wanted to, but I was afraid that I would lose what I have. Stability, meaning. I'm strong in the game, but I've learned to be strong without it. A refund could ruin this." He pulled out an envelope. "It's an invitation to the Massachusetts Chess Open. I applied on your behalf. Anonymously. Everything has already been approved. I paid the fee." She looked at him sharply. "You've crossed the line. I believe in you," he answered calmly. "And I have the right to do so." She was silent for a long time, clutching the envelope in her hands as if it contained a bomb and not paper. She finally said it with a condition. "You play too. If you consider me an equal, be there, not a spectator." Student with student, he nodded without thinking. From that evening on, they began training seriously at night, when the city slept. At dawn, in an empty hall with a thermos of tea, on the battleboard, in the eyes of respect. Sometimes the silence between moves lasted longer than the game itself, but something more grew in it, deep, like old roots. He watched how she explained her thoughts, not with words, but with moves, how she saw a weakness, but did not punish for it as soon as it gives a chance. He realized she was the game he had always been looking for. Without spectators, without a show. Only equality, only meaning. With 3 days left before the tournament, he said, "If you change your mind, I'll call it all off. I've already made my choice, Nathan. I'm coming back, but not for the title, but to prove to myself that I can be strong not only in the shadows." And he knew she had returned. The Massachusetts Chess Open was held in the hall of the Old City Philharmonic. Dark oak ceilings, columns cracked with time, a silence in which even breathing seemed too loud. The air was filled with the aroma of paper, coffee, and nervous tension. There was no shouting, no applause. Here, judged by moves. Emily entered the hall alone, without a team, without the press, without clothes with logos. A simple dress and hair pulled back in a bun. She didn't look around, didn't look for familiar faces. Only the board, only the chair, and the name on the card Brooks. First round, confident victory. The second was technically more difficult, but she felt right at home. The board was her territory. She didn't play aggressively. Her style was different, calm, expectant, but deadly precise. It was as if she were talking to each opponent, but in a language only the two of them understood. Nathan, reserved in a gray jacket, no tie, no audience. He played confidently, but without rushing. His game was tense. He was losing on the 12th move, but pulled through with a sharp combination. All this wasn't for the cup. He played because he had promised, to himself and to her. By the end of the second day, it was clear they were both confidently heading to the semifinals, and if they both won their games, they would meet in the final. People were already whispering about her in the corridors. Who was she? Why did no one know about him? Carter, what was he doing here among the regular players? No one knew that this game had no spectators from the start, just the two of them. Late in the evening after the final round, they met on the stairs by the side exit. The wind ruffled her hair. He held a thermos of tea, as always. They didn't need prepared lines. "Tomorrow," she said, "we can both reach the final, and it will be a fair game," he nodded. "I'm afraid of not losing," she said, looking into the distance. "I'm afraid that if I win, everything will change." "It won't change," he replied calmly. "I've lost to you before, and I've only become better. I've become different thanks to you." She looked at him intently, as if searching for confirmation in his eyes, and found it. The semifinals took place at different times. Emily played in the morning. Her opponent, a young national master, started quickly, aggressively, in a blitz style. She responded with restraint, but accurately. On the 28th move, he made a sharp move with his queen and fell into a trap. Checkmate in 9 moves. Nathan played in the afternoon. His opponent was a professor from Harvard, systematic and strong. The game was even. On the 35th move, he took a risk and lost a bishop. Then a pawn, then time control. He fought to the end, but the game was lost. When he left the hall, she was already waiting for him with a bottle of water and smiled. "Now everything depends on me." "Yes," he nodded. "But I'm proud of you not for the game, but for the choice." "Which one?" "You've learned to lose with dignity. It's harder than winning." The final was scheduled for the next morning. Her opponent, Thomas Raines, was a silent grandmaster from Harvard. He was 56. Confident, sharp, fast. He was considered the favorite. When Emily sat down at the board, a peculiar silence fell over the hall. Nathan was sitting among the spectators, not in the front row, but close enough to see her face. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. He was already close, not with his eyes, not with his words, but simply with his trust. The game began in a classic Queen's Gambit. He played white. On the 8th move, he began pressing, but she brought her knight into an unexpected maneuver. On the 13th, they exchanged pieces. On the 20th, he had a chance, but he rushed. On the 27th, she made a quiet pawn move. No one in the hall understood the essence. Only Nathan tensed up. He recognized this structure. It was a hidden breakthrough. On the 31st move, a rook sacrifice. It didn't seem like a mistake, but after 2 moves it became clear it was a trap. A system he'd driven himself into. Raines understood and surrendered. Without further ado, the hall fell silent. Then a storm of applause. She stood up without a triumphant smile, without delight, as if she'd repaid a debt rather than won a trophy. She didn't linger at the banquet. The speeches were. The minister presented certificates. Journalists were broadcasting live. Her name was increasingly heard on social media, in the news, on the lips of people who previously didn't know who Emily Brooks was. She got up from the table, ignoring the calls, and walked across the room toward him. He was waiting by the window away from the stage. "Thank you." He was silent, just took her hand. She didn't remove it. Late at night, they walked along the river in silence. The wind swayed the water. The city hummed somewhere in the distance. They didn't need to say much. "You know," he said finally, "I thought I was looking for the perfect opponent, someone who would challenge me, someone who wouldn't regret it. But I found someone I could play with without fear of losing." She stopped. "I don't promise easy games." "That's what I was hoping for," he smiled. "But I'm ready, not as a player, but as a person, for a long game, without timers, without resignation." She looked at him for a long time, then quietly said, "Yes." And there was no theater in this, only depth, only reciprocity. The Chess Inclusion Center in Boston now has over 100 children. Emily is its director. Nathan is a mentor and philanthropist, but more often than not, he's just a man who places the pieces opposite his wife and says, "You'll start with white again, because you're my first move."